On air, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good part of the day, folks. Welcome everyone to the largest, fastest growing, and the most active global community for adaptive large-scale product development and business agility called Large Scale Scrum. Today we have a very special guest in the house, and I would like to give her a prompt and the needed welcome. Her name is Maria Paz Andrade. She goes by Paz. And I would like to say just a few words about her and her career journey. Paz is the product person. She's a product specialist with a very strong background in building and scaling products in cybersecurity, SaaS, and e-coms. She has led many product launches. She has done a lot of strategic road mapping and cross-functional collaboration with other product people as well as people in the research and development area. She has helped lots of startups to grow and flourish. She's passionate about customer-centric innovation, and she bridges business and technical teams in order to deliver high-impact solutions and successful products. With this in mind, and without any further road paving, which probably she doesn't need much of, I'm going to pass the baton over to Paz, and I'm going to thank you for being here with us. And do please take it away and share your experiences with us, Paz.
Thank you. Thank you for the space. So welcome everyone. I'm Paz. I'm a product person. I have been doing this for at least 10 years. I have been developing digital and non-digital products. And the reason why I'm here and why I'm deciding to share with you and with more people this talk about who really builds your product is because during this experience, I have seen how the culture of the companies and organizations and how teams dynamics and how people relates to each other can drown your product or can take your product to be really successful. So the idea of this talk is to rethink altogether who really builds our products and get together to a conclusion on how we should do it. So let's get started. So let's answer this question: who really builds your product? And every time I ask these questions on every company I collaborate with or have been working with, the answers I get is the product team and the engineering teams, and sometimes they have the design team separated from the product team. And that's where I know that we have a problem. Your product, as we're going to be represented as this pink box, should be built by every single area and team in your company. At the second a founder decide to build the company, he is making product decisions. So from that second on, every person that it's coming into your company, it's building product. So we need to embrace that. So over the next 40 minutes, we're going to try to understand why and see which are good examples and bad examples, and how can we take those bad examples into good ones altogether. So let's get into what's normally happening on most of all these companies. Silos is what we normally see in most of the company, or what I normally see. And I invite you to share your stories here because it's more than helpful. I represent silos like this. In my experience, what I have seen in a lot of the companies and organizations I collaborate with, every team has their own objectives, their own OKRs, their own metrics, what they have been measured by, and they are securing that. They are working towards that because they want to keep their jobs, they want to get their bonus at the end of the year, and they don't care about the other team. They don't care what the other team is doing, and they don't care how what they are doing is going to impact the product either, because that's the product team work. They just care about how they're going to maintain their metrics okay and healthy. In that way, the only one that is suffering in the middle and getting a little bit raw is the product. And for picturing this, I brought some real life examples. like from finance teams from a company I used to collaborate with. And this was a finance team from a real big startup. Um, these finance teams have one objective for the year that was reducing expenses. One way they found to reduce expenses that remain cash positive was to make a layoff of people who had really big salaries. And after doing that and seeing all the impact that have on emotionally on
Thank you.
the people that remain on the company, they decide that they can't go further that way, and they start looking through the tools that they were using on the organization. So they pictured three tools that were really expensive, or they thought that were really expensive. That was Databricks,
Mm.
Dockers, and Datadog. One important thing to say here is that their bonus of the year was tied to this OKR too. So they have to reduce the expenses and they have to nail this metric in order to get the bonus of the year. They decide to turn off these three tools for the cheapest versions of them without consulting with the engineering team or the product team or the data team. When these teams came up to know that it was going to happen, they start talking with them and trying to stop them. They just save Databricks, but they were not able to save Docker or Datadog. I'm not blaming the finance team for this decision, but what happened at the end is that a lot of people from the engineering team and from the data team were taking out from the features they were working on for several weeks in order to start working on the integrations from the new tools, because they have to do a lot of refactors on the back end and the technical side of the product in order to make this work. They have to do a lot of migrations from these old tools to the new tools in order to make these new tools work. And also because of this time was not something that was taken into account on the roadmap, they have to do this quickly. So there was a lot of corner cases that were not taken into account that make the product not perform the correct way when they were done. What end up having a lot of performance issues in the product. Obviously, the finance people get their bonus at the end of the queue. They were happy because they nailed the OKR. Their bosses were happy because they reduced his expenses and they remain cash positive. The CEO of these companies were actually mentioned their gain and highlighted these people as how good employees they were on the all hands they were doing at the company. But the product was on fire, and customers were making a lot of complaints, and they were actually losing customers over how the performance of the product was working at that moment. And the finance team members didn't know that they were doing or they were taking product decisions when they were making these decisions. They were just trying to accomplish their jobs and they were just following the rules they were putting in front of them. And this is happening because their goals were put in there without taking into account the rest of the organization. Another example, and I think if there's another product people here, they will feel me, is salespeople. Salespeople, at least on the organizations I have worked with and collaborate with, are being measured by the amount of closed deals, not about the quality of those deals. So they have to get an X amount of deals closed by the end of the queue and by the end of the year. And they're being measured of how good they are in their work by doing that. What ended up happening when the pressure raised, and actually I have like one example in one of the companies I have worked that they got like prices by their manager when they close X amount of deals, like real prices. Is that they start closing whatever they can and they start promises everything, the moon, sun, I will give you everything, any feature that you want in order to close the deal. When we start reviewing the contract and start working with those customers, we start seeing that everything that was promised to the customer, sometimes 90% of the things that were promised to the customer cannot be done. Maybe because it cannot be technically done because we have to work on something else before in order to do that. But sometimes it's because that feature is it's not important for our business. It's not important for where the product wants to go. It's not important for the state of the product today. It's not important for the rest of our customers. And we're not going to start building a product customizes for one customer just because we closed that deal. And at the end, we end up in the same place as before. The customer end up turning and say goodbye and close the door. So once again, it's not the fault of the salespeople because they want to keep their job and they're doing whatever they can in order to do it. Is that because of how their goals are put it there, because of how the OKRs and the KPIs and how they're being measured, they end up doing and acting as in silos, separated as the rest of the company. They're not being aligned with the rest of the teams, not recognizing that they are part of an organism. And that started on the top, from the C-level, from the management, from who are actually putting those OKRs and all those objectives. And at the end, the only one that is on fire and who is suffering is the product and is the company who is then losing those contracts and those customers. Another analogy that I love to have for this is, let's think company as a body. Our organism has a lot of separate organs that they need to sync and work together, but we recognize them as separate parts that do separate works. If the brain, the lungs, the heart, the liver do their work on their own and they work perfectly fine and they do perfectly every single task they have to do, but they don't connect between each other, we will die anyway. And this is exactly what happened to the companies. If any department of the company do their work perfectly fine, but they don't align with what we have on what is happening on the other department, they don't know what is going on the company, they don't care, and they don't talk, they don't communicate, and they don't collaborate. It doesn't matter how well they're working, how well professionals they are, that will not work, and the company will eventually die. So for this, I brought real cases, and I brought two. One based on a digital product and one based on a non-digital product. I used to have a boss. His name is Alan Cement. He's from the Agile community here in Argentina. And he taught me that everything can be a product, not just something that is an app or something that we can touch. And so that's why I wanted to bring two different cases. The first one is called Felicorp, and I want to make a disclaimer here. All the names of the corporations or organizations that I brought are changed and are based on my family pets. So nobody is hurt here. The first case is a medium-sized startup, more or less 400 employees. They were born as a digital startup. They were 100% digital product, SaaS product, but they were working as a 200 years old company. Very slow, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of steps to whatever you wanted to do. They were giving prizes for people when they were succeeding individually. They were not encouraging people to work together. They were not encouraging people to work as teams. They encouraging people to work on silos. They put OKRs to people individually also. They encouraged competition. What it was encouraging people to eat each other. They were doing layoffs constantly because of performance issues. This reminds me also to a story of when there was people racing horse races and the horse died. And instead of changing the horse, they were trying to feed the horse or fire the guy who was doing the race because they didn't want to acknowledge that the problem was that the horse was dead, basically. And here was happening the same. Instead of acknowledging that something was wrong on the company, they were constantly firing people. And the people who was staying here was the people who was just doing what they were told to do. And one of their main values was, we know best what our users need. So every person here who was doing any market analysis, user analysis, customers interviews, they were discouraged to do that because they knew better what the user needed or the customer needed. They didn't know. That was their primary hypothesis. So they were investing millions of dollars in features that nobody was using. And when they faced that, what they were doing was firing the people who were working on those features. What that happened at the end is that people were so afraid of losing their jobs that they were stopped doing a lot of things. They were just doing what they were told, and they start lying, and they start building a culture that was really hard to work with. And what was crazy there is that I have never seen so many good professionals in one single place, so good technically and so good in their career path also, work so bad. But it was the culture that was built around them and the context where they were put that was make them play that game and just make them survive there. And at the end, the people who were there for more than 3 years, what they were doing was just trying to survive and being there to get their salary. And they didn't care if the product was working, if the product was good, if the feature get to production okay or not, because they were just being measured by the amount of time they spent coding something. Because for them, their measure for success was how quickly a feature was getting to production, for example, and not the quality. So you can imagine that most of the times the features have to go roll back because they were not working or they were disconnected, or they have to make hot fixes or patches in order to make them work. And I want to mention here how important is not only the culture but the HR team in this, because all these dynamics was affecting the product, and the HR team was encouraging this culture constantly, making or encouraging the culture of fear and disconnection. And I didn't thought until I collaborated with this company how important was the HR team in all this until I saw this, like how HR can make this change and how can make things worse or make things better, how can help people to make them feel better where they're working or make them feel worse. So I think this is one great example for how make things this way can really kill your product. The product was really disconnected, full of features that nobody was using, and there had a really high churn metric, like over the 30% per queue. And the case number two was a non-digital product, is an NGO. And this case was crazy. This was I collaborate with them because a friend work there. They have two departments, specifically one who is in charge of donations made by people, and one department that is in charge of donations made by companies. And they have a case that was a middle ground where a company wanted to be the proxy of their employees making donations as people, but they wanted to be like the middle ground for them. The thing is that if any of them took that case, they have to change the goals of the numbers they were going to achieve into the nations and do a lot of paperwork there. So none of them want to take that because of the amount of work that it was going to take. So they start fighting between each other who was going to take that new initiative with this company, because it was not a full company, it was not full people. And they spend so much time fighting between each other that they end up losing that company, because the company get tired and said, okay, I will go and work with another NGO. And that money was going to be used to be sent to children that were in a war zone. So it was like really important for a really important cause. And it was like for something major than them. And that was the product for this NGO. Like they used this donation for something bigger than them. And they end up losing because they were not being able to collaborate and understanding that they are building for something bigger than their teams and their goals. So for me, like these two very different companies that have the same problems based on their cultures and how they're being measured. I don't know if any of you want to share any examples or something that happened on your companies. It's a moment while I drink water.
Folks, this is the time when you can chime in. pause opens for questions in the middle of her presentation. So that's fine if you raise your hand and ask.
It's okay if it's not. Okay, so I bring all this because for me, the most important thing is to understand this. The product is a reflection of the company culture and team's dynamic. And the most important thing for this talk for me is that all of you takes this today or for the next week, but that you reflect how is the culture of the company you are working on or you're collaborating with, how is the dynamic of the teams you are working on, and how are the values of the company you are working on, and how are you collaborating with people you are working with, because probably all that is reflected on the product you are building. And sometimes we think that we need to get better technically, that we need to change things technically, and we just put a lot of effort on the technical teams and how we adjust that. And sometimes we need, and most of the times, we need to just see the broader picture and we need to change culture. That is a little bit more difficult, but if we change that, all the rest will change along. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I also brought two cases of companies that make this in a good way. And I brought two cases because in the case of Timoteo, it's a smaller company and they are changing now. And they start with a small experiment. And in the case of Dakota, they are a bigger company, like 500 employees, and they are doing it quite well in the full company. And let me start with Timoteo. They were in a similar state at Feli. They were doing a lot of things, questionable things. But they realized that they couldn't keep doing things like that, that something was not working, that they were stuck on their growth path and they have to change. But they were not sure on how they have to change. So we started working together with them and they wanted to try something new, but they wanted to try something new in a smaller team. While the rest of the company continued working as they were working, they decided to put aside a smaller team, and the condition was that it was going to be a multidisciplinary team where we put there all the people that was needed to work. And what I mean with this, salespeople, marketing people, documentation people, design, UX, UI design people, customer success, support, engineering, product, and also the C-levels and the founders, because for me, that was very important that they changed the way they were thinking and they were doing things. Because if not, it doesn't matter if we change all the teams, but they continue doing the things the same way. And we start changing the way we were doing things. And we start implementing Agile with the condition of then start implementing less. But we start implementing Agile here. We start doing all the ceremonies. We start working with planning sessions. We start building roadmaps. We start working with focus. And when they start seeing that that the velocity of the team changes, that the team was more compromised than before with the product they were working, that they wanted to release and deliver features with quality, not just something there because they have to do it. They saw that they wanted to expand this to the rest of the company. But again, it was not just the team, it was the founders and the C-levels that were also changing their mind on how to build things, because they were also setting the north of where the company wants us to go. And when they understood where they wanted the company to go, they were able to also put goals on where they wanted the rest of the teams to go towards that north. And in the case of Dakota, for me, it's a really good example because it's a company I work with. And that's why I wanted Charlie to join us, because he worked with me there, where literally was a really well-functioned organism. They have the areas and the normal teams that we know in any company, but they have like the big OKRs from across all company, and the OKRs for each team and the initiatives that each team was going to be working were tied this big OKR. So everything was cohesive and collaborating between each other. And what was more important here was that is if finance has to reduce expenses and was going to make a decision of changing any tool, it was not going to make that decision without informing and talking with the rest of the teams because they wanted to know if they were going to affect any other people with this decision. They wanted to see if there was any corner case they were missing because of this decision. And if that's the case, how they could work with that team in order to make it as smooth as possible, that change or not doing the change. Communication here was the key. And what I'm saying communication, and I start working here a couple of months before the pandemic, so it was a lot of these things was remote. It was not having 100 meetings. We were having just the amount of meeting necessary to keep that communication and that alignment and that sync working. And I think that the key here was that we all understood that we were building the same product. We were working towards the same product success. And that was key. And another thing that was really important here is that we also understood that the customer was our stakeholder and we were building for them. And every decision that we were all making, independently of in which team we were working, was for making that product better for that customer. So the customer was always part of our conversations. He was all the time being interviewed. He was all the time bringing it on the different meetings we were having. And for me, that was amazing. And also the culture that was built here was making all of us felt part of something bigger that we wanted to contribute for, and seeing that your team members were giving their best in order to make that work makes you feel motivated to give your best in order to contribute to that. And HR again was a really big member of all that culture that was really, really, really important here. So how can we do it? So for this, I thought about three ways of doing it. And I think that the first one, the two of the first two are attached is product development is a company-wide effort and embrace system thinking. And why I think they are tied is because it's what we were talking now is let's not think about product building product about one team or changing one person or bringing one person because he or she will make the big change. Let's think about this as a system. Let's think about this like it's something like all the teams and all the company has to change the way they are thinking and are building and are making decisions. And we can start as an experiment as Timoteo did, but let's make sure that in that small team and that experiment we have all the people necessary that are building product, because we need them to get back to their teams later and to be able to spread that word and to spread that way of working in order to continue contagious this way of doing things. And the last one, I am brainwashed with Agile. So for me, adopting Agile framework or less framework is a key because I don't think there is another way of doing things. Honestly, this doesn't mean that you need to put or to start working with agile or less as a recipe. It means that you need to be able to read the context where you are and see which parts of it works in that context. But again, I don't think there is another way of doing it, of working. Because it's bring up all the good values. It brings us collaboration, it brings us the communication, it brings us alignment. It's talking about building one single product and bring all together toward that same effort. And it's what we have been talking here. And I think that's the key. Again, it's not following one recipe because I don't think it exists just one recipe. It's being able to read all the ingredients and see which ingredients worked for you in the moment that you are today and being able to evolve to the next moment. But I think these are the three key points, at least to start working now. And again, I invite you again to think who really builds your product on your company, and to start rethinking that it's not just the product team or the engineering team, that it should be a well company effort. And if you have any questions or if you want to share any of your experiences, this is the moment. We didn't saw the chat, but
Hey, folks, this is a great time to ask questions. You don't have to wait until the very end. This is an
Um,
opportunity to engage. Harsh,
Hello. I
comment.
have a question. Yeah.
Please go.
Miss Paz, I had a question where regarding, so in your experience, have you ever come across, so I agree with you that a lot of the success for the product has to be top down, right?
Mhm.
And then applying an agile framework allows a lot of collaboration between just cross-functional teams and within teams and doing all these sprints and stuff. Uh, Have you ever come across a scenario or anyone who kind of came up with some sort of quality metrics? And I don't mean like quality as in like product specification. I mean like like the time and effort spent on a user story or like the value add for the customer. Like is there a way is there a quality sort of metrics that you've ever come across that you felt like, oh, this is pretty good, right? Like as a product owner, like say a product owner, is leaves the company, but like, they leave behind some sort of framework or metrics for other people to kind of follow so that the product owner isn't the only, pivot point for kind of keeping the company in an agile framework.
Yeah, I encourage every team to have their own KPIs when they're releasing anything. Like I think that the most easiest one to measure with KPIs is the marketing team, the sales teams. But I think that each team should have their own KPIs to measure with what quality or value is for them. Not only the goals that we were talking at the beginning. Um, for product is easier because when you're defining your epic or your initiatives, you must define how we're going to measure value, and you define the KPIs, and you define how we're going to measure that in numbers. But I don't know if there is, I will answer it straight. I don't think there is a key metric that you have that is go through all the company. I think that each team should define them depending on what they're going to be working on, of what
Right.
value and quality is. But the only thing that the thing I will encourage the teams to keep in mind is don't measure just the quantity. Measure how that will impact something else, because you're working with people. So what you are doing is going to measure somehow people, the people you're working with, your stakeholders. So measure the quantity, but measure also how that will impact the people is working with that.
Okay,
So
thank you. Thank you for highlighting that part because so that was kind of my like crux of the question because I agree with you. Like each team will have their KPIs and then, I think my question was in order for those KPIs to not remain in the silos, right? Like metrics to measure people is I guess what my like I know it's company dependent, product dependent, culture dependent, of course. I'm just saying, have you ever come across an example that you're like, you know what, they got it going. They have something working for them.
yeah, it was this one that I was sharing with you in Dakota. What they did is that they have the OKR, the main OKRs for the year of the company, and then the OKRs of each team, like the finance team, the HR team, the sales team, marketing teams, product teams, engineering teams. Our own OKRs were tied to that main OKRs. So we were like forced in a way to accomplish our OKRs in order to that big OKRs that were all tied together. So in a way, maybe the finance OKRs were tied to the product OKRs. So we have to be working all together all the time. So it was not just finance reducing expensive. If finance reduces just the expenses, maybe that will impact engineering OKR and product OKR, and something what we were doing will impact finance OKR. So that was like forcing us to collaborate all the time because they were tied to a bigger one.
Okay, yeah, that answers my question. Thank you. That was perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean, isn't that the whole point of OKRs? It's to get organizational alignment. You shouldn't be trying to do an OKR that's optimizing for like the local team. It's how do you kind of pull in the same direction as what the organization is desiring to do. And maybe you have to take a slightly suboptimal approach for this quarter, but in furtherance of a bigger goal, right?
Yeah, that will be perfect. Like, yes, that's the objective of OKRs. On my experience, I have seen just a couple of companies doing it that way. Like they have the OKRs but first of all, I have not seen a lot of companies define OKRs the correct way. And then when they do, I have not seen too many doing the rest of the definitions of each team, doing it tied to those big objectives. Then on my experience, what I have seen is that they have like companies OKRs that are mainly tied about get more customers. And then finance OKRs and product OKRs have nothing to do with that. Like engineering OKRs, like also nothing to do with that. But
Which is
yes, I
also goes along with so many other things in business contexts is they're too short-term oriented because great, you brought on new customers, but if you don't address churn, you brought on a bunch of people only to see them depart like within a few quarters or so. So was that really effective?
yeah, yes, yes, and I agree with you. That's just when I saw this happening also in companies that were also pivoting all the time because they were just seeing what was in front of them for the next month or the next 2 months. They were not just being able to see what's like a little bit of more longer view. And then with longer view, I'm not saying like just build a roadmap for the 5 next year because that doesn't work either. But at least see where you want to go in 1 year, 1 year and a half, and then build towards that.
I guess which comes to the last point I'll try to make, and that would be about having a coherent strategy. Because if you don't have that, you really don't know what you're aiming for. And like your point, you could be just going all over the place and not really getting anywhere.
Yeah, the most important thing, and that's why I'm being a bit in the with understanding, like getting the founders and the C levels on board, is because you need to understand what you are doing, like why you are solving what you are solving and which is the problem you are solving. If you are not understanding that, then you are just building for building. And that's why on the other example that I brought, when they have that core value that we know best what our user needs than our users itself. You're starting with the wrong foot all there already there, because it's your user already needs or already knows which is their problem. Maybe they don't know how to communicate that because we are like trained to communicate solutions instead of problems. But you have to ask the correct questions in order to get to the problem. You just need to know how to listen and how to ask questions. But if the founders, if the C level are not aligned and don't know which problems they are solving and they're not aligned on that, it doesn't matter what we do below because we have a bigger problem there.
Absolutely. They are they are building a widget and looking to say, hey, you can use our widget to solve this problem, but it's not about what's the best way to solve that problem. So I agree with you.
Yeah. Now I think that you sent something on the chat, right?
Oh yeah, this was just me sharing something that I read about in the past. But I think I was just maybe curious. So a lot of the learnings, right, like come from Toyota, right? Toyota Production Systems, right? Like I think a lot of people on the call, like Lean, Kanban, right, of the world. So And I think even the system thinking concept, I don't know where it originated from. I think, but even if I bring it back to Toyota, yeah, Toyota, what is the end product, right? It's a car, right? It's on the right. The car is on the assembly line, so everybody is working towards getting that car out of the factory as fast as possible, right? So I'm just trying to understand in organizational context, right? When you have many products, right? Like if you are a bank, you have checking accounts, you have saving accounts, right? Loans, credit cards, and so on, right? So what has been your experience to actually bring the system thinking approach to the organization? Like, have you worked with any tools
Uh,
or anything in your experience?
yeah, I have worked with companies that have multiple products inside, and honestly, like we were treating like we were already treating first it was one product, and then we created new products. And we were treating those new products as the different verticals we were already working on. Like we were working on kind of squads here, and each team was having like one area of the product that was being treated as a separate product. And then we had like these planning sessions all together, and then we have all syncs all together. So we were syncing all the product owners and all the tech leads and the support people and marketing people and sales people. So we were all aligned, and we were doing that each sprint and then each queue, and then the planning session across all teams. So when we added these new products that we were working, they were being treated the same way, because even though it was something like separated from the main product, it was something that was like a casting of the product of the main product. So we wanted to be having the same treatment. So it was not having a different treatment, honestly. Like we were using the same tools, we were using the same framework. We were using like, again, we were using less there, but we were using like the same ceremonies, all the same, honestly. It was not something different. Already the main product was really big. It had 4 verticals, so the product was already separated by that, but it was already working really good as a system. So when this new product was born, it was brought into that system, and it has their own demos. But when we were doing the planning sessions, it was brought into those planning sessions, as it was not treated as something separated. Like it was one thing more that we have to work on. Like it was not treated as a separated company. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think in some ways it did. Like, yeah, I think I don't know if you have worked with value streams, but I think that this is one of the challenges I see in organizations, especially the tech organizations, because they are pretty much at the tech organizations are mostly dealing with products that are enabling the end products, right? I think this is where the challenge comes from, right? And we see this cost centers and revenue centers and all that, right? Like, so I think this is right. So I try to understand what is the product, right? And I think this is where the struggle starts like, at least in some of the places I've been to. Like, what is the product, right? And what type of product it is, right? I think that in the ecosystem, not every product is an end product, right? Not every product is going to be interacting with the end customer, if end customer is the one who's paying the right uh, for the
No,
service.
also each sub product can have their own users or their own stakeholders. That can happen also. Like because you have like one big product, each sub product that big product can have, is not, that doesn't mean that each part is going to be consumed by the same people. Like
Right,
you
right,
are going to treat them differently on that when you are developing for that. But when you are organizing everything, you should be like, everything should be aligned. I think that the main thing should be treated the same way. Then what you do and when you are working specifically in each initiative, okay, then you should be able to treat them separately. That's why you are making those divisions, because you understand that one part and the other part cannot be treated in the same way, and you need to research this part differently. or this vertical differently because your users needs different things and you need to make that research in a different way. And I think that happens when you do a double click in not in the broader planning. But if you want, we can talk that offline and we can go further.
Yeah, no, I think we are good. Like, I mean, one of the also one of the things that I see even in the like especially in the tech side is the maybe little bit of not have an understanding of what is a product and what is a product life cycle, right? Like
Mm.
in the tech, right? And when we talk about apps, right? When we talk about platforms, I think people do not understand exactly like where are we if this product for the sake of a conversation is a product, like where are we on the product maturity, right? Life cycle. Like I think not every right, like because depending on where it is on the lifespan, you have to actually treat that product that way, right? Is it in the early stage? Is it in the maturity stage? Right? Is it in the decline stage? Where it is? I think, and that is where I see uh, a little bit of a shallow, right? Like understanding when it comes to tech. And I'm sorry, I'm throwing tech under the bus. I myself is sitting in a tech organization, but I
No.
think there is a little bit of that, right? We do not understand enough the product concept itself, right? Like iPhone for me is an example, right? Like iPhone, is it a product, right? If iPhone is a product, like why it is not declining, right? Like it has been coming out year after year, right? So I think
It's a lot of
that part, yeah. Sorry.
But I think it's a lot of things. Well, you brought iPhone as an example, but iPhone has a lot of things, and it builds a lot of community. It again, Apple has a lot of sense, and as an organization working together to build a lot of products. And it has a Steve Jobs that, as a product person, is a visionary and understood a lot of things without talking with the users. That it's not something that a lot of the product people has, even though we wish to have. So a lot of us, we need to do a lot of research in order to become a Steve Jobs. I think that we need to also one thing that I see a lot of in the companies is that they think they are like a Steve Jobs, that they have that vision um, without doing the research. And I think that we need to stop thinking like that. We need to think that probably we're going to, that probably we don't know, and we need to research a lot, and that we need to investigate a lot, and we need to do a lot of interviews in order to understand where we are standing and where we're going to go. And there's no shame on doing that. And the best, like the more we learn, the more information we are going to get in order to do our next step. And again, our users know where they're suffering for. And the question and the problematic is there. We just need to think about the solution. And I think it's as easy as that. As easy. It's not that easy, obviously, but I think it's that easy in terms. It's that simple. Sometimes we over complex ourselves thinking on this main idea and on this main problem that we try to solve when the problem is out there, and we just need to listen carefully. Okay, they have 8 minutes left. I don't know if there is any other question.
Yeah, I would encourage Paz to have it maybe. Are you willing to take more questions, or do you wish to proceed with um more information sharing?
No, I'm okay. We can do more questions. If not,
Yeah,
uh,
it would be great. Yeah, if people ask questions.
I don't know, we're almost on the top of the hour, so it's okay. And it's a Friday, so I also understand.
Maybe I will ask one more. I
It's
don't know
okay.
if it was answered like the view on BAs versus POs. So I would extend that question. Uh, prod, Product owners or product managers and project managers, right? So I think we do see right bit of both in every organization, like pretty much that I've been to. We have projects and we have products, and then there is a lot of overlap, right? Many times. So maybe just wondering what has been your experience of working with the product owners and project managers, and how do they complement each other, and where do they focus, right? And is the project manager okay? I will not try to kill the project management role here, but is there a value still when the organization is trying to turn towards a product centric organization uh, for having even project managers?
Sorry if it's polemic what I'm going to answer. Like, for me, a product person should be able to do both project manager and product work, whatever it is, product manager, product owner, whatever title you want to put it. Should be able to do work. I think it's put it one layer more in the middle who can cause more noise than other thing. Not because the people who does project management doesn't do their work well, because I have worked with project manager that does their work incredible, that I think that they should go to product. It's just that both roles for me in the same place is just one intermediate layer that is not necessary. That I think that one person can do it perfectly and have this and make more sense for me to do the end-to-end, to embrace the end-to-end, to do all the gap, to cover all the gap and be this all the and build all the bridge instead of doing it two persons. Like it's weird for me to have one person building half bridge and then the other person building the other half of the bridge. That's for me. Again, I have worked with project managers that are amazing, and that for me they should be product. But having both doesn't make too much sense for me in the when I see the organism.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the answer, Paz. I think we can take one more if you would like to, if the folks would like to ask you one more question, we can take,
Yeah,
after which time we.
sure. So, hey, Paz, this is Satya here, and I apologize if this question was asked because I missed the first 30 minutes. So going back to this OKRs, right? What is your experience in terms of how organizations align if they are not using OKRs? Like what have you seen in your experience with companies that are not doing OKRs, and how they are basically getting the masses together in terms of a unified vision? Is there something that you can share a little bit more on what companies do?
Yeah, I am fan of working with startups. So a lot of startups doesn't do OKRs, honestly. And I encourage them to do OKRs, if I have to be 100% honest with you. Because I think that's a good way of building a good habit. And probably they're going to do it wrong at the first time, and then they're going to get better and better, but that's how you start. So my first advice will be, if you are not doing OKRs, just encourage people to start doing it. And it's preferred to do it wrong the first time than not doing it at all. And if they're not doing in anything, at least what I try to do is to have an objective. It doesn't matter if we cannot measure it at the first, because then we can at least measure the initiatives and the features that we're working on towards that objective. But have one North Star, one common objective of where we want the product or the company to go to. And with that objective, I don't mean like duplicates the users on the platform, like one objective tied to value. Then we can talk about those other objectives that are more about quantity. But one objective tied to value, like what we're really looking for with the company, with the product, what problem we're trying to solve, with emotion we're trying to transform on the user when they are using our product. What we're from where we're trying to take our user from point A to point B, and really trying to understand that. So every time we're trying to decide and prioritize, we're doing this or we're doing this, okay, which one is more near to that objective or to that goal that we talked about before? What is moving us more near to took the user from point A to point B? So that's would be my suggestion. Like set a goal or North Star, but attached to value and to where we want to take the user.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you very much for
So
the question. And folks, we at this point need to I'm stuttering. We need to wrap up. I do want to thank Paz very much for coming out and doing this great um, experience sharing with us. And this is amazing information. And the graphics that you have been using just are just amazing. So I'm not even sure how you're going to zap it into a PDF, I guess, right? Or
yeah,
however you do it, will send them over to me so I can share it with the audience. So I want to thank
perfect.
everyone for joining. Thanks once again. Enjoy the rest of the day and your weekend. And our prayers go out to the folks in Thailand. That's the most immediate thing that happened, I think, overnight. They had an earthquake, and hopefully everyone is safe there. So, but everyone else, thank you for joining, and have a good day. Paz, thank you very much to you personally.
Thank you, guys. See
Cheers.
you. And thank you
Bye.
for the space. See you. Bye.